Okay, so this is the video for question 2, part A. You're given an English argument and need to symbolize it in English by giving your own symbolization key. So I'm just going to go through it and highlight some common problems as we encounter them. So the first thing that can be good to do is to go through and just try and identify all of the logical connectives. So you can walk to the door only if, that's one, you can walk to the halfway point between yourself and the door. So one common issue that we encountered was that people would take this and, as well as some other ands in this argument, and treat them as if they were conjunctions. But in this case, this and is not a conjunction. Not all ands are conjunctions. The reason that we can know it's not a conjunction in this case is because the things that it kind of connects aren't individual sentences, right? Sentence letters are supposed to symbolize entire English sentences, complete English sentences, but you can walk to the halfway point between yourself. That's not a complete English sentence. And the door is not a complete English sentence. So that means that this and is not connecting complete English sentences. So it shouldn't be treated as a conjunction. Rather, this entire thing should be treated as an atomic sentence. So I'll just write that out. So we have A, you can walk to the door. That would be our first one. B, you can walk to the halfway point between yourself and the door. This was a very common mistake. Okay, moving on, continuing to identify the connectives. Of course, if you can walk to the halfway point between yourself and the door, then you can walk to the halfway point between yourself and the halfway point between yourself and the door. Just once again, this and is not a conjunction because it does not connect complete English sentences. Instead, this whole thing should be treated as an atomic sentence. C, you can walk to the halfway point between yourself and the halfway point between yourself and the door. This is a rather long way of saying you can walk to the quarter-way point between yourself and the door. That's what this is saying. But it's just avoiding the use of the phrase quarter and just sticking with halfway point. But again, this is not a conjunction in this case. So continuing. Now, if you can walk to the door, only if, it's another connective, you can walk to both the halfway point between yourself and the door and the halfway point between yourself and the halfway point between yourself and the door, then if you can walk to the door, you can perform an infinite number of actions in a finite period of time. This sentence is a doozy. It's got a lot going on. We'll get to translating or symbolizing it in a moment. But for now, let's just add another atomic sentence to our list. Here, you can perform an infinite number of actions in a finite period of time. That's our fourth atomic sentence. All right, continuing on, but you cannot perform an infinite number of actions in a finite period of time. So this not, that'll be a negation. And the conclusion, so we must conclude that you cannot, again, a negation, walk to the door. So those are all we have all of our atomic sentences. We have our English connectives identified, so we can move on to symbolizing it. You can walk to the door, A, only if, so conditional. You can walk to the halfway point between yourself and the door, B. That's our first sentence, our first premise of the argument. Some people got mixed up with the only if. Remember that A only if B means A arrow B. Another equivalent way of writing it, some people wrote something like some people wrote this. this is equivalent, that's fine, not a problem. You didn't have to write both, you just needed to write one. All right, so that's the first sentence. The second one, of course, if we just ignore the of course here, that's just fluff. If you can walk to the halfway point between yourself and the door, so that's B, then you can walk to the halfway point between yourself and the halfway point between yourself and the door. That's C. So if B, then C. Again, some people wrote this, that's fine, it's equivalent. Third sentence, this one's long. I'll do it bit by bit. So we have this, if you can walk to the door. You can walk to the door is A, so if you can walk to the door, something like this. If you can walk to the door only if, so only if tells us there's gonna be something here on the right-hand side of this conditional. If you can walk to the door only if you can walk to both the halfway point between yourself and the door and the halfway point between yourself and the halfway point between yourself and the door. So that means that this is a conjunction in this only if. So it have, you can walk to the halfway point between yourself and the door, and you can walk to the halfway point between yourself and the halfway point between yourself and the door. So this, it turns out, is the antecedent of an even bigger conditional. See, because here we start off the sentence with an if, and this is the then here. I'll just highlight this in a different color. The blue here, the if and the then, those match up with each other. So that's the main connective of this sentence. And then in the antecedent, we had a conditional. And then in the consequent, we had another conditional itself. Second conditional, if you can walk to the door, A, then you can perform an infinite number of actions in a finite period of time. Oops, sorry, I messed this up. That should be, that just should be that. You can perform an infinite number of actions in a finite period of time. So that's our third premise. It's a complicated one. Some people wrote this was a common alternative. Again, that's fine. This is equivalent to the original, or the one I wrote. Okay, so that's the third sentence. Okay, fourth sentence, but you cannot perform an infinite number of actions in a finite period of time. So that would just be not D. And then the conclusion, so we must conclude that you cannot walk to the door. So this is our argument. The things after the slashes are just alternatives. Yep, so that's the symbolization for this argument. The most common, pretty much the only place people consistently had a problem was with these ands. So just be careful in the future. Not all ands are conjunctions. Pay attention to what the and is connecting in the English.